Welcome everyone to our third career speaker series of the year. My name is Claude Richard. I am the outreach coordinator and an advisor for the computer information technology and cloud computing programs here at Delgado Community College. And I'll be hosting this event for you guys. And I am joined today by Anastasia Aubrey, Senior Scrum Master at DXC Technology. Anastasia has been a dedicated Scrum Master for over 10 years. She's managed teams that have created a multitude of web-based and mobile applications from banking to healthcare. And today she's here to show how all that happened, which is so cool and so awesome. I'm really excited that she's here with us today. But before I hand it over to her, I'd like to just tell everybody what exactly the Career Speaker Series is and go over a couple of ground rules. So for those of you who are new, haven't been here before, or maybe forgot since the last one, the Career Speaker Series is a monthly series of guest presentations from industry professionals in the IT and related fields, just to talk about what it is they do, how they got here, and how you can as well. We put these events on to demystify the tech careers and opportunities in the world for our students, for our faculty, staff, and other members of the Delgado community, since technology is everywhere, right? So, and we're all using it now in quarantine. So the format for these events is pretty standard. We'll have a presentation by our guest, followed by a Q&A. So please mute yourself until that time, or you can feel free to drop your questions in the chat if you're like, oh, I want to remember it. And I will get them to our speaker. If you are having fun today, and we hope that you are, I encourage anyone watching to shout out about it on social media. You can use the hashtag #TheOtherCSS, and also be sure to @ us. We're at Delgado IT Pro on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Finally, and then I will be quiet, Delgado Workforce Development is offering a 2-day Safe Scrum Master Course. I believe it is this weekend, March 13th and 14th. So if you're interested in what you hear today about Scrum and Agile, you should contact Miss Crystal James. I don't know if she's on here right now, otherwise I would tell her to talk. Miss Crystal James in Workforce Development at kjames@dcc.edu, or call her at 504-671-5675, and I'll copy that in the chat so you don't have to remember it. That is it for all my fun announcements and my introduction. So I'm going to hand it over to Anastasia, and she's going to talk to you guys. So Anastasia, take it away.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Anastasia Aubrey, and we are going to have a Scrum Masterclass. Alrighty. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about how it started versus how it's going. So I started off as a hardware technician, and I was repairing network connections, computers, and doing that for businesses as well as for residential. And then from there, I wanted to really get into the software side. So I started to do a treehouse lesson where I self-taught myself just the basics of like websites, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, played around with it a little bit. From there, a friend of mine was trying to start up a tech startup, and he was like, hey, I need you to help me. So I was like, okay, so I could really, get my development skills in. And I was horrible at developing. So I was like, this is not, and so we actually needed someone to kind of manage a team. And so from there, I kind of transitioned into that non-technical role of a Scrum Master. So I was like, oh, okay, I'm really good at this. I enjoy helping people, talking to people. So I really started to kind of like hone in on that area of it. From there, I did a full stack immersion boot camp, which was extremely intense. It was 6 months, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. It's one of those things where it brings out the good and the bad in you, but I definitely suggest that anyone that has the opportunity to do that, has the time, the resources to be able to accomplish that, I would definitely, encourage you guys to do that as well. In the process of that, I obtained some certifications, my CSM, SAFE, and also did a lot of networking. This was, of course, before we were in the pandemic. So there was an opportunity, there was a lot of meetups. So I basically spent a lot of time after work going to tech meetups. They had some through like Launchpad, some through Tech Talent South. There was a lot of different meetups you can do to just kind of get yourself out there, get your name out there so people can say, okay, who is this person and what they're trying to do? So that way, if you needed a job, They're like, oh, I remember Anastasia was, she does Scrum Master work. Let me call her up. So that was really important. Also, a lot of volunteer work as well. I got involved with the New Orleans chapter of Women in Tech, which was a good community, of course, as well as Girls Who Code, a lot of volunteer work. So that was, really important, something I would definitely suggest. In the process of working, I decided to go ahead and do another boot camp to learn another programming language, Ruby on Rails, which was really helpful. Because even though I knew that I wasn't going to be a developer in this industry, I understood the importance of being able to know the technical jargon and what the development team was actually going to be physically doing and working on, so that I could kind of have a better scope of how the project would be laid out. And that leads me to where I'm now. I'm a senior Scrum Master with DXC Technology, also a senior program manager. And so we're going to get into a little bit of what Scrum is. Okay, so Scrum, the terminology Scrum comes from the sport rugby, basically where you have a play, it doesn't go well, you guys huddle together, and you kind of like reevaluate, okay, what do we need to do differently? I'm not a big rugby fan, so I can't tell you like the logistics of how, but like even with football, kind of like huddling and doing that timeout. So that's essentially where the term Scrum comes from. Scrum is an agile framework. There's many different methodologies with agile. You have Kanban, you have XP, so many more. But Scrum is the one that really is the most successful. We found that Scrum helps with developing, delivering, and sustaining complex products. There are three main keys with Scrum: transparency, inspection, adaptation. Transparency is my favorite one, because I really believe that it's important to set up an environment where the development team feels comfortable being able to talk to you about what's going on, where they have any issues without feeling like, this isn't a safe space. So that's definitely important. All right, so we have some of the ceremonies. So essentially there's like a list of ceremonies that you would do in the full duration of a sprint. A sprint is anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks. The first thing that you would do at the beginning of the sprint is you'd have a sprint planning call. And basically what this session is you just take the time to say, okay, this is what the testers are gonna do. This is what the front end developers, the back end, like everybody kind of gets their assignments as far as what they're going to accomplish for this sprint. You have your daily scrum or your daily stand up. This is typically about 15 minutes long, depending on the size of the team, the complexity of the project. And what you're basically doing is every morning you guys are meeting and you're saying, okay, this is what I did yesterday towards the project. This is what I'm going to take care of today. And here's some things that might be a blocker. And this is a good time, so that way, if one person is working on a user story that, is going to run into someone else's user story, they know, okay, well, I know that John is about halfway through on his part, so I can go ahead and start on this part. And when we implement it together, won't be any issues. So it's really important to be able to have that daily scrum and making sure that everybody's there for that, so that we can kind of know what the team is doing. Also, if there's any type of issues that like you guys run into, say you're about like 3 or 4 days before the demo, and then it's like, oh, well, we tried this, the testing is not working. So this is a great time to voice that. So that way, you guys will be able to let the product owners know as real time as possible, like, hey, there might be a delay on the demo because of XYZ. And the next thing is the sprint review or the demo. So the good thing about Scrum and Agile is that at the end of however long your sprint is, 2 or 4 weeks or 3 weeks, at the end of that sprint, you're going to kind of showcase, this is what we've done thus far. And this gives the product owner or the client an opportunity to say, okay, I like the way this looks. Maybe we could change this or that. So you can, pivot if necessary. And then of course you have your retrospective. This is the time where the scrum master and the team sit down and they say, hey, this is what I really think went well with this sprint. Maybe we should really do this more, or maybe we should like not do this because I noticed that like didn't give the testers enough time. So it's a time to really kind of just pretty much like review that sprint and figure out how you can make the next sprint a little bit more successful. All right, so waterfall versus agile. So this is really important. I'm gonna tell you why. So when you're a scrum master, or anytime you're doing like a non-technical role, project management, you need to understand that a lot of times you usually deal with some clients that came from waterfall. Waterfall was like the old school way of doing development. The easiest way is like, so a person comes to you and he says, okay, I want to make a bike. I want you to build this bike for me. I want the bike to be red. I want it to have purple streamers. I want it to have a clown horn, and I wanted to be able to go up to like 10 miles an hour or whatever. So they give you all these requirements. You sit down with your group. You're like, okay, this is what we're designing it. We build it and we give it to them. And then the client is like, oh, well, in my mind, I thought the bike being red was going to be nice, but I'm realizing that this really needs to be a blue bike. So now you've done all of that work. It's like, okay. So agile is perfect because versus waterfall, you have this constant change just going around in a circle. So when you have your sprints, you're saying, okay, these are the requirements. This is what the client wants to see. This is how they want the finished product to look. And when you start doing that cycle of like, okay, this is what the product looks like right now. Do you like it? They can have that opportunity to say, well, no, I actually didn't like the splash screen to be blue. I would prefer for it to be red, or I like this font to be a different size. So let's, change it. And you haven't like completely produced a full product. So it gives you an opportunity for the development team to be able to fully flourish without it being any type of frustration, any type of issues. So one of the things that you want to also kind of remember with the waterfall versus agile is that a lot of times you will have clients or companies that are asking for a project, and they're like, hey, we're getting into agile, and they're still doing like waterfall type of ways. They're still kind of like, I really wanted this, this, and this in the middle of a project. So you want to make sure that in that process that you're kind of coaching the client as well of what the agile ways are, and what the proper steps are. One thing that you should also remember is that agile is extremely easy to understand and teach, but it is a challenge to implement. When the team is completely agile, but the client is not, you want to make sure that you're constantly always having that coaching hat on to have them prepared of like, okay, look, this is how you should do it. And it takes some time, and you'd be surprised. I've seen a lot of different products that have gone from waterfall to agile, and the success is just uncanny. All right, so what does a Scrum Master do? Scrum Master does everything sometimes. Like literally you feel like you are doing anything, like you are picking up their kids from school. Like it's a lot. You're making sure that the team has everything that they need to be successful. One of the big things is that you want to make sure that you are having a open communication environment set up for your development team. You want to make sure that they feel like, okay, when we're working, this is a safe space. No one's going to criticize me. No one's going to make me feel like my question or suggestion is dumb. And also, like, if there's an issue, they should feel comfortable enough to be able to come and tell you. A lot of times when we think about blockers and impediments, we think about like, oh, it's just like, oh, well, something's going on with my program or something's going on with the computer. But sometimes you have situations where there's some personal things going on with the developer or a tester or someone on your team, and they need to feel comfortable and, like, hey, I'm like having this going on. So it's going to kind of affect my work life because we're human. So you want to make sure that you're setting up an environment that makes them feel comfortable and safe so that they'll be able to let you know real time so that you can be able to kind of play damage control as much as possible. You want to protect the team. And I say that this is a really big thing. Anybody, when you go through the process of learning about being a Scrum Master, you hear a lot, servant leader, servant leader. It's a real thing. You are the Fort Knox before, the product and the business side comes into the development team. You're there to protect them. You want to make sure that, like, if your team is working, that they're not getting like IMs or emails from the product owner or the stakeholders saying like, hey, can you add this feature in this sprint? Can you change this? Can you change it? You don't want that happening. That's scope creep, and it's an absolute no-no because you're now falling into that whole waterfall versus agile. So you want to make sure that you're protecting your team from any type of blockers, where that may even be people that are stopping them from being successful with the project. You also, of course, facilitate the ceremonies. As we saw on the previous slide, you have your daily scrum, your retro, your sprint planning, the demo. You facilitate these ceremonies, these calls. One of the things that you want to also remember is that essentially the key to being a successful Scrum team is getting the team to the place where they're self-sustaining, meaning they're able to manage themselves. And that if you go on vacation, I tell my team this all the time, like, I need you guys to be to the point, like, if I got hit by a bus, you can still have the daily Scrum. This does not stop. You guys are not stopping the process because I'm in the hospital on the oxygen machine. And that's important, but I hope I don't get hit by a bus, by the way. So, that's the important thing. If you have to go out, or if you're not able to attend this, and especially if you have multiple teams, it's good to know that, all of your teams can still function if you're not physically there with them. You want to also make sure that they have the tools that they need to be successful. A lot of times with my UX team, if they need a license for a program, a new software, making sure that stuff is available, even all the way down to the meetings. A lot of times there will be meetings that the team needs to know information about, but if they come to those meetings, they're usually an hour, 2 hours long. That's taking away from their development time. So you want to make sure that, okay, I'm attending these meetings, representing the team, and I have the takeaways and I bring that back to the team. That's very key. You want to try to shave off as much of extra fat that they have to deal with and put that on yourself, along with your other responsibilities, of course. But of course, sometimes, and this is something a little bit different now that we've become remote in Ponderosa. But before, I was a coffee person. I would go, like, let me tell you, if we were pressed for time and we were hitting the deadline, and especially if I'm having my team working late, I'm getting dinner. Like, what y'all want? Pizza, Chinese, whatever. Like, I'm making sure that I'm setting up everything you need. So because you're here, I'm here with you, you got to eat. So, like I said, as a Scrum Master, you wear many hats and you have many roles. But essentially, you are the heart of the team. You want, it's important. So let's see here. So project management. Now, project management is very similar to Scrum Mastering. However, it's kind of like on steroids. So it's like, you are the CEO of this entire project. What you have to remember versus being a Scrum Master, as a project management, you really start getting into the deepness of the budgeting, true metrics, having constant communication with the stakeholders. It's a people-facing role. So if you find yourself just in everyday life, like, you know what, I don't have a problem with talking to people, or I don't have a problem with meeting people and having conversations and talking about subject matters, on the fly, then a project management position would be probably a really good role for you. It's very important to know how to kind of switch up the jargon. A lot of times when you're talking to the leadership and when you're talking to stakeholders and clients, they're not technical. So they don't want to really talk to the developers all the time, because a lot of times developers are extremely technical, which is awesome, by the way. But they're just like, huh? Like, what are you saying? So the project manager really steps into that as being the mouthpiece for the team, of saying, okay, if there was a delay, the client doesn't care about the technical reason. They just want to know, okay, what is what can I do? So it's important to be able to kind of have that cross-functional language. Some of the things that you'll be doing, of course, is working with the priorities of the project. So pretty much mapping out the project, sitting down with the client and saying, okay, how do you want this application to look in the end? What are your wants? What are your needs? What are your must-haves? Filter those out and kind of say, okay, what is the budget? And then from there, also going into that process of saying, okay, how long do you think that you need this? So it's like, okay, if we sit down and we're mapping out a project, it's like, okay, I think I have 6 months and then this needs to go to beta, or I have a year and then it needs to go live. So what we need to do now is sit down, okay, how many developers do you need? What level experienced developers do you need? How many testers do you need? So we just kind of pretty much map out the project from beginning to end, So that way that everyone leaves the table knowing, okay, this is what the project is going to look like. Another thing that you do is also going through the process of communicating key milestones. So if you guys are at halfway point, you have a 6-month project and you're at 3 months, and okay, so far we've spent this much money, we've done this, this is where we're at, we've got this much remaining. So you want to make sure that you're kind of marking that so that way the client knows what's going on. One of the key things is being completely, transparent real time as possible. If something looks like, okay, it's not a problem this sprint, but it will be 2 sprints from now, you should be able to convey that over to the product owner, to the stakeholder, letting them know like, hey, this is what we're looking at. So that way, 2 sprints from now, they won't find out. They've known about it the entire time. You also do a lot of reports. The reports part is a lot different from being a Scrum Master. You're mostly doing like facilitating the ceremonies. But as a project manager, you go through the process of looking at the metrics, getting those metrics available for your leadership team, stakeholders, the budgeting, so they can kind of see, okay, this is where the team is right now. This is how they're looking this sprint. This is what we're forecasting for them to look like for next sprint. So just kind of giving them that that forecast of how the project is going and how the development team is moving along. Also creating project plans. If you go through the process of, the project was supposed to be one way and you're going to have to pivot, then that's an opportune time for you to be able to create another plan. Like, okay, so let's go back to the drawing board. You essentially sit down, kind of map that out, work with the client. But those things are those are your babies. Like I said, when I say that you're the CEO, that means that like when the project starts, it's yours. When the project ends, it's yours. But of course, also making sure that you know your development team. Just like a Scrum Master, you're also there to protect them. It's extremely important that you make sure that, you're separating the business jargon that they don't need to know about, or it's not even really important at this moment because it's going to take them away from what they're doing, that you take care of that and handle that. So that's definitely important. All right, so I have some resources that I want to share with you guys. Like I said before with my journey, I did start off doing some Treehouse, Pluralsight, like self-coding, and a lot of this is free. And I think Treehouse has a really good subscription for if you use like your student email address. They have really good deals. I enjoy Treehouse because when it comes to the programming languages, especially if you've never done it before, they're really hands-on. They have different sessions. They have like the IDE where you can go in and kind of do your own coding and stuff. So it's a lot of fun. Some agile resources that I have available as well. These are some great websites to look into obtaining your certifications. I got a few of my certifications through Scrum Alliance, a really good organization. I would definitely tell you to focus on somewhere down the line getting your PMP if you want to really branch off heavily in that project or program management role. The PMP is very intense. But once you obtain it, it is, it's almost like a gold star that just goes with you everywhere. Really helps you with the ins and outs of what it's like to be a successful non-technical manager. And then of course, the key to a lot of, your work with the teams is you're not just managing teams, you're communicating with different communication styles. So, you hear about the peacocks and, the reds and the yellows and stuff, but it's true. You have a communication style, but the people that you work with can be completely opposite communication styles. So you want to be able to know these communication styles, understand them, pivot your conversation with the person that you're talking to, because that helps set up that environment as well as it helps the project move smoothly. Because you have a person that's like, they feel like, okay, well, she hears me, or, he hears what I'm saying, or he understands what I'm saying, even if that's not your normal communication style. So I have some like really good books, but I also want you guys to look at the diagram. So you have so this is an iceberg, obviously, and just like the Titanic, like you see like just a small piece of ice, but below it is like this huge mountain that is gonna sink the ship if you don't, but it's important. A lot of times people just think, oh, you have these certifications, but with those certifications, some of the skill sets that you're doing, you're becoming a coach. There's so many times where I have, since I've really been heavy in the project management role, where you work with clients and they don't know anything about Agile. So you have that opportunity to coach them on that. You're a mentor for your development team. You are a mediator. I cannot tell you how many times, like, especially when, you're working in an office, 8 hours a day, you would be surprised the amount of times where you have those kind of conflicts where two people are like butting heads. You got to be that mediator. You got to step in and kind of like say, okay, how do we work through this? We need to work together. We need to have this product finished. What do we need to do? So you wear like a lot of hats with those titles of being like a project management or being a scrum master. So I have like some major, takeaways that I want you guys to really remember from the talk. The first thing is like, don't be afraid of the coding boot camps. Like I said, some of them are not as intense as others, but in the end, you really do learn. You have a good takeaway from them. So I would say just like find something that works for your schedule, find something that works for your financial needs, and just try it. Just go for it. Networking. I cannot stress to you how important it is to be able to like put yourself out there. You're like a miniature business. When you get into this tech industry, you want people to know who you are and what are the things that you do. If anything, just so you can like, okay, like I need to know about this, and I heard that you knew about it. Can you help me? It's a huge community. You want to make sure that you really kind of like immerse yourself into the culture because it's so important. You get to meet different people, you get to know like the different things that make people tick. And you start to realize like, oh, like I've gone to meetups where I've talked to different people and I've kept in contact with them. And I'm like, hey, I'm trying to, put together this, or I want to have something with a group of kids about STEM. And I know that this programming language. Can you come in and talk to them? So networking is always essential in this culture for sure. But also I want to let you guys know to let your experience serve you. Okay, so perfect example. I know someone who is a very successful project manager, and they used to be operations manager with retail. People think like, oh, that's retail has nothing to do with technology, but it's the skill sets. Like use those skills that you learned at your other jobs and just the way of life. One of the things that I realized is that I enjoy doing Scrum Master work because I enjoy talking. That's something I've been doing since I was a kid. No one taught me that I didn't go to school for talking. Like my mom used to say, girl, you're gonna be Oprah. So, I mean, you use those skills and, the skills that you already have inept in you and you apply them, and that's whether you choose to, pursue a technical role or a non-technical role. Like the things that you've already learned in life are going to help you apply to this industry. A lot of times people don't feel that way because they just think tech, 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 but there's so many like mechanics of tech that's important. And another thing I want to leave you with is imposter syndrome is okay. Doesn't matter what people tell you. Everybody around here is faking it till they make it. Like, it's okay. Like, if you're in a room of people and, everybody's just talking the tech jargon or whatnot and, different things, and you kind of feel like, oh God, okay, I don't know anything. Just, hey, stand there, say what you do know. You would be surprised, like some of the most intelligent people that I have talked to that have been like developing for 30 plus years and tell me like, I still have imposter syndrome. Like that's a real thing. I know that it kind of is like to people, but no, it's okay. If you don't fully understand what's happening, listen. There's many times that I'm like on a call or I'm like at a meetup and I'm like, okay, I don't know what that is. So I just write it down. I just make a note of it in my brain. And when I get back home, I'm Googling it. Like Google is your friend too. Like, don't be afraid of the resources that you have available to you. All right, well, I now have it open for questions. This is my LinkedIn, my email information. Always, of course, feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or if you want to know about some further material or what certifications might be good for you or whatnot, then hey, please feel free to hit me up. See?
Awesome. Thank you, Anastasia. We actually have a question in the chat from Dominique Riley, who asks, what are some of the tools that you use daily in your work?
Awesome question. So for tracking purposes, we work through Jira. which is a program that basically houses our user stories for the project. It helps us kind of track, okay, where we're at. We have our Scrum board up there. We also use for communication, we use Teams. So like our meetings are in Teams. One of my teams that I work with, we have a private communication, which is Slack. And we do that just kind of like, just to kind of not have like, certain eyes are looking like, okay, hey, what's going on? Just kind of like, so it doesn't feel like it's super monitored. Discord is another good program for that as well too. Let me see here. Another tracking tool that's really good is Azure DevOps. And they have a lot, and that really helps in regards to, and Jira is good with that too, but Azure is really intense with the metrics piece. So if you really want to kind of like personalize your metrics and tailor it to just one sprint or whatever, without just doing like a broad picture, I found that to be very helpful as a tool.
Awesome. And a follow-up question from Dominique is, what was your favorite project that you worked on?
Oh gosh. Okay. So I know this sounds really bad, but my favorite project originally was the French Quarter Festival that I did back in 2017. But since then, my new favorite project has probably been, which oddly enough was the next following year. I did it was a authentication alcohol bottle app. So basically the short version is that in Brazil, there was a lot of counterfeit alcohol that was done through spirit companies. So like if you were getting like Ciroc, it wasn't actually Ciroc, it was like rubbing alcohol and people were like going blind and it was like really bad. So this company came to us and they were like, we need to find a way to like verify that these like bottles are legit. So we went through, we set up an authentication program through the app where they had to scan like the cap of the bottle and scan like an etched in like code that was in the bottle itself. That was a lot of fun. And I would have to say it was probably the most fun because it was like my baby. Like I legit, like we sat down, we did a discovery session. We talked about what they wanted to see, what they didn't want to see. And we did it from beginning to end. We were there for like the beta release in Brazil. It was very exciting. So I think that was probably my favorite one right now. Yeah.
Anastasia, good presentation.
I have a question.
Oh, okay.
What new experience or skills going on in your career in this current day?
You said what new experience? I'm sorry.
New experience and skills due to everything changing. What new
Right.
things? What new things happening right now in your career?
Absolutely. Good question. So, now that we're kind of in a different time and everybody's at home, one of the things that I had to learn like fast paced was how to get the team back to that communicating role when we're just all at home. Not to say that of course people are at home and not doing their work. We never say that. But it is a little bit easier when you're in your pajamas to not necessarily be on time for meetings and whatnot. And so that was kind of trying to find a way to still get everybody to mesh together and just building up those communication skills with everyone. When you're remote and you're not physically there in someone's face, the accountability is actually, it can be a little bit more challenging. So yeah, and I would say that with that just comes, I did a lot of research. I reached out to a couple of other my colleagues who have already been remote throughout like the duration of their time as being a program manager or scrum master, and just kind of got tools and tips from them. And so, you have those virtual happy hours and whatnot. So that kind of helps you with that. So I think that since we've kind of been in this new transition, that's one of the things that I've really, just trying to learn how to get keeping the team engaged since we're all at home right now, and just kind of working through that.
Quick question for you, Anastasia. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit more about user stories and their significance in the Scrum process?
Absolutely. So the user story is essentially kind of like a puzzle piece. When you think about the project as a puzzle, each user story, when you put it together, it's going to eventually make the picture of the actual puzzle. And so with that user story, you're kind of breaking down a few things, depending on if it's a user story for the developer, for UX, or for a tester. You want to say, okay, when I have this user story marked as done, I've accomplished A, B, and C. From there, from a testing perspective, if it is a development user story that needs to go over to the testers, you want to make sure that you kind of map out those requirements that, like, I know that this story will be successful once it's hit this check mark, and this check mark. So the user story it's kind of like the veins where it's like, you know, you need them all to kind of start kind of moving together and flowing properly. But yeah, and of course, not to get like too into it and confusing, with those user stories, you can create tasks within those user stories. Depending on the project, the complexity of what you're needing from that project. There's a lot of things depending on what tool you use. Jira, Rally's another good one, and even Azure, where they have good section off of like if you need to do subtask and whatnot. So yeah, I hope that helps.
Also, we got 2 questions in the chat. One from Marco Scott, who says, ultimately, I'm interested in running a project one day. I thoroughly enjoy network installation, especially on the infrastructure side. Where's a good place to start a network installation career if you have any insight, especially knowing that he wants to, you know, run projects?
Right. So one thing I would tell him is that so you want to really try to focus on maybe looking into getting the PMP, because the PMP would be a helpful actually, that is like the universal certification for whatever type of side, if you're on the hardware side, the networking, software, or even outside of the tech industry altogether. PMP is the perfect way to be able to give you that full database knowledge on how to run a project from beginning to end. It kind of gives you, you know, you'll get that knowledge of what budgeting looks like and like an in-depth version of budgeting. So if you definitely want to be at that place where you're fully running this project, then I would tell you, as far as certifications that would help you kind of get there and be able to understand it, I definitely would suggest the PMP. And then, like I said, it doesn't matter what, you know, even on with the hardware side, it still is a very helpful certification to have. And like it does hold a lot of merit. You know, companies worldwide, like, you know, if you have your PMP behind your name, they're like, okay, this person knows what they're doing. So yeah, I would definitely suggest that.
So quick question for you in terms of achieving a PMP versus a SCRUM certifications. What's the time differential and the intensity? I know to achieve SCRUM, to become a Scrum Master, there's a certain amount of time. And from a PMP perspective, trying to achieve a PMP, just give folks an idea of what the differential is in terms of time and intensity. Thanks.
Absolutely, absolutely. So like with your CSM, you would essentially just go through a course, a training course that lasts about 2 or 3 days. And then from there you would test and then you would obtain your certification. Versus the PMP, it is a lot more intensity behind it. They want to make sure you have to be able to show that you have so many hours of management skills that you have implemented towards teams. And it doesn't have to necessarily be a technical team because like I said, with the PMP, it's more of a project overall. So it doesn't have to be in necessarily in the tech industry, but you do need to be able to show, okay, for this company, I did this and I had this many hours of management. You need to be able to show that before you can actually qualify to even get approved to take the test. But you also need to go through a training course. And I believe the training course was 60 hours. I did it for 2 days out of the week for about 3 months for 2 hours, I believe, give or take, each session. And so you'll need to go through those courses. And those, I will tell you that the PMP is intense. I'm still studying for it, but I know like I have a few colleagues that have already passed it and got it. It is expensive. The whole process is a little bit expensive. That's why, you know, it can kind of be a little bit intense, but I will tell you that you'd be surprised how much knowledge you already know just with your everyday life that would actually kind of help you help with the studying, help with the courses. And they have a lot of books there. There's a new version every so many years, but they do have on those websites, the Scrum websites, they do have the books that you can order and study through. I will tell you the PMP is a lot of definitions. So they want you to know a lot of terms, what they mean, how they apply to the team. So it's definitely a more intense certification, but it's hands down, it is definitely worth it. I'm telling you, when you obtain it, it opens the door and increases the salary for a lot of positions. So yeah.
Awesome. We have another question from the chat from Brittany Thomas asking, what was your first Scrum role like and how difficult was it to implement? Which I'm assuming means the project.
Right now. No, so my first Scrum role was with the tech startup that I was working with. And so I would say that that was my first Scrum role, obviously, but in a project, but we were making emojis for your cell phone. And I guess because of the fact that it was kind of like, we were all kind of in that trial and error, and it's a startup and there was not like a real pressure versus like being like a digital company. It was a little bit more laid back, but it wasn't until I started like really working for major tech companies where it was like, okay, you really notice that it's important to have that structure. So I think that that first project was okay. It was fun, and all of them have all had like a lot of fun to them, but I think that one was a little bit more fun because it wasn't like a pressing deadline. And implementing it was, you know, it was fairly easy because we kind of already knew what we were doing. Transitioning into that to like more of the corporate roles where, you know, you have a deadline, it's set in stone. Those are a little bit more, it takes a lot of like organization to make sure, because you have to be organized and you need to make sure that the development team is organized and everybody's on track. And the reality is that you're kind of responsible for that. Like, you're definitely, not to say you're like the parent, although some of my team members have called me the mom of the group, but you know, you're making sure like you're holding people accountable. You're getting into people like, hey, you told me you was gonna give this to me at XYZ and I don't have it. Like, you know, so sometimes you have to have tough conversations, and you know, but it's worth it, because when, you know, when the project is successful and everybody's looking at the demo and everyone feels proud as a peacock, like it was worth it when you guys had those tough conversations. So yeah.
And so you had mentioned like startup versus corporate, like with that in mind, can you give some insight on kind of like the pluses and minuses of startup versus plus and minuses of working corporate?
Yes, and it really, of course, it depends on the startup and where it's at. A lot of times with the startups, you guys are just trying to like make some money. Like you're trying to like get a project that goes to a deliverable. That, you know, because deliverables equal funding. So you know, it is like sometimes it can be, I guess, you know, a little bit more laid back, and it also depends on like, I guess, the corporate company you're working for too. I would say that my thoughts of startup was a lot more like how remote is now, where you're just kind of like, you're able to kind of, you have deadlines, but it's not as tight. You're kind of working, you are able to a little bit like work at your own pace a little bit more. But both experiences are very essential. I feel that, you know, I learned a lot of stuff working with big organizations. And when you work with smaller organizations, you learn a lot from that too. It really just is a matter of just, I guess, you know, that pressure of when is this due, or how big the project is, or how much money involved. I will tell you this, when you have over $50,000 involved each month, promise you, people are looking at you like, you need to get this done. So yeah, so the more money that's invested in a project, the more you can kind of probably feel that pressure if things go awry. So yeah, there's like the difference with that. So yeah.
So you are more than likely one of a number of Scrum Masters that works for DXC, correct?
Say it again, I'm sorry.
You're more than likely one of a number of Scrum Masters that work for DXC.
Yeah.
So how do you get your assignments? Are you assigned to a particular project, or how does that work?
Right, good question. So with our office in New Orleans, there is, I believe now, when it's interesting, because when I first started working for DXC almost 3 years ago, I was the second Scrum Master they had. with the company for the New Orleans office. But now it's about a good 15 to maybe 20 of us. And essentially what it is you have, as far as like the chain, you've got the account managers that are bringing these accounts to, you know, your center. And essentially your manager will just kind of like filter it out based upon you guys' resumes, what you guys have done with the company itself. So like for me, I had experience with mobile and web applications, banking applications, and healthcare. So a lot of times, you know, if some of those type projects would come in, then my manager would say, if I'm not already on a project, like, hey, you know, I think you'd be a good fit for this. You know, like I want you to sit down with the client and talk with them. And then it's really kind of like an interview within an interview. So like you're already working for a company, but a lot of times you're interviewing with that client to find out if you'll be a good fit for their project. And sometimes you're not, and that's okay. And sometimes, you know, it's like, oh my God, we love you so much. So, you know, you really, it's kind of like a matter of like where I'm at right now with DXC. We just kind of, as those accounts coming in, our manager will filter them out, or whatever, whoever the delivery manager is for that project, they'll filter it out and say, hey, you know, I think Anastasia is a good fit, or I think Nomini is a good fit, you know, so they just, depending on your resume and the experience that you have and whatnot, they'll bring you in. So yeah.
Okay, another question for you.
Yeah.
As you're executing your sprints.
I was gonna ask, I'm so sorry, but I was gonna ask you if it's possible we could add you on LinkedIn. I know it's only that.
Absolutely.
Okay, I just want.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I have it up there. Yeah, but absolutely. I don't know if they have a lot of Anastasia Aubreys on LinkedIn, but yeah, like just look for my face. So yeah. But yeah, so I'm sorry, James, what were you saying?
But okay, getting back to that, when you're working your process and you're executing one of your sprints, if that sprint is going to the left a little bit, you're not going to be able to do it in your sprint period. How do you handle that? You know, from a Scrum Master perspective. Obviously,
absolutely.
You talk to the customer regularly. So how do you handle that when it goes sort of not the way it's planned?
Right, good question. And that is actually that happens. That's a common thing. It's kind of like a thing. I don't like to be the bearer of bad news, but I will do it. And that is the biggest thing. You have to rip that band-aid off. If you know you guys are, so you have a 2-week sprint and you're in like that second week and it's like a few days before the demo and it's like, okay, wait, this is not testing right. Like that is the time to tell the client. Do not wait until the demo and say, well, I know we were supposed to show this to you, but we got, you know, unless something happens, I guess the day of course. But I believe in trying to be as real time as possible with the client, because what happens is they'll probably be mad. That happens. You know, you just have to kind of deal with that. But they will appreciate the fact that they knew about what was going on before like 3 or 4 days later. You know, they knew that. So when they walk into that demo, they're already knowing, okay, I'm not going to see this feature or this feature because it didn't test well and they're having to go back to the drawing board, or they're going to have to implement that into the next sprint. So they kind of already know what they're going to be expecting when they walk into that demo. And that's probably the most important thing I would tell you is just when you're like doing that Scrum Master role, communication is like so key. Do not hesitate to let the product owner, the client know what's going on. I know it's kind of like a thing like, oh, I don't want to tell, you know, mama the bad news, but tell her, rip that Band-Aid off and tell her, because in the end game, you know, that transparency is so key. And what it does is it builds a rapport and a trust between you and the client. So they trust that you're going to be honest with them. So therefore they say, okay, well, I know that it's not looking good right now, but I know that they're going to bring it back because, you know, we've sat down, they told me the game plan, they let me know real time what was going on. So that's really important to be able to do that.
Thanks for that. I know that you have a SAFE certification, right? With SAFE?
Yes.
Okay, and there are other Scrum organizations that will give you certifications, correct?
Oh yeah. There, I would tell you, so Scrum Alliance and Scrum.org, they're probably like the top two organizations that give you the most variety. And I know that Scrum Alliance has done a really good job of pivoting their courses to online since we've been, you know, in the pandemic. So, and they're reputable. That's the most important, because they have like a lot of companies, I think, that can offer like, you know, certifications, but they don't necessarily hold weight. I know that, you know, Scrum Alliance is reputable worldwide. They, you know, so that's very important too. You want to make sure that you're staying with that. You don't want to take the time and the money to get a certification that, like, oh no, like nobody has ever heard of the company that you went through. So that's really important.
Super. And did your company pay for the cert, or did you pay for it out of pocket?
No, so it was a toss up. So one of my certifications, the DXC did reimburse me on, but my other certifications I came out of pocket. You know, just yeah. And I will tell you, some of the certifications are not really expensive. Like my SAFE certification, I was able to find a really good deal with instructor that was running courses out of this university out on the North Shore, and it was $100. I think it was like $150, and that was golden. That was probably actually the cheapest certification I got. The PMP, my company did pay for the training course, which is about $1,300. Yeah. So they did pay for that. I will be paying for the so when I did when I became a PMI member, I had to pay for that out of pocket, but you do get a discount with the PMP. So I'll be paying for the PMP out of pocket, but I believe that our company is going to reimburse us. But it's all a process. And I will tell you this though, if your job is not going to pay for your certification, look, these are investments in yourself. You know, something that you're going to take well past the company that you're working for. So I know that some of them can be kind of pricey, but just look at it as an investment in yourself. You know, just like, you know, if you need a new car, you're going to buy a new car, you know, if you know, so it's the same thing, because, you know, each certification that you have behind your name, it, not to say it equates to money, but it kind of does, because it's saying that, okay, this person has taken the time to learn the ins and outs of this specific skill with Agile, or this specific skill with project management. So knowing that you put that time in and you invested in yourself, that is, you know, you get that, a lot of times you'll get that reimbursement back with, you know, the salary increase or finding a better job with higher pay, for sure.
Good answer, thanks.
No problem.
Awesome. So I have a question for you. You had mentioned networking. You were not the first person to mention networking. You will never be the last person to mention networking. But you mentioned tech meetups, but obviously we're in a pandemic.
Yeah.
So what do tech meetups or networking look like now, like for people interested in project management?
Virtual, a lot of stuff is virtual. Perfect example, Saturday, I'm going to be speaking for a tech panel. And that we were originally supposed to be like in-house, like, you know, people come into, you know, the actual panel and, you know, have booths and stuff like that. But COVID happened, and so now we've pivoted to virtual. I think that we're going to start seeing that a little bit more now, just moving forward, mostly because people are saying, okay, well, we can, you know, have these Zoom meetups or Teams meetups. I've done some work with Xbox and Microsoft. And that was, you know, everything has been like the team, like I have not personally met my team that I've been working with face to face yet. And we've been working together since October of last year. So, you know, right now the volunteering and the meetups look like, you know, just pretty much virtual. And that's okay. You know, I tell people that this part of the, you know, the virtual world has been helpful for people who are probably a little bit more introverted and don't do so well talking to people face to face. And it gives them a chance to still talk to people, have those icebreakers. And, you know, you're not necessarily seeing that their hands are completely wet from sweat. So, you know, yeah, I would tell you meetups, they're still doing a lot of virtual meetups. They're like, if you go to like meetup.com and then specifically search in your area, like in the New Orleans area, of course, and then like for tech meetups, they've got a couple of things. I know, I think Tech to South, they do a lot of boot camps, but they also do a lot of meetups They do some meetups for different, like if you want to do STEM stuff with children, for the women, they have a lot of women in tech stuff. So that's essentially what it's looking like. Everything is kind of virtual based for right now, Zoom meetings and whatnot, but you still have that opportunity to get your voice out there, because that's what it's about. The purpose of the networking and kind of you being your own brand is getting your voice out there. What are the things that you're trying to do in this industry? What would you like to see? What are the ideas that you have? And kind of like meeting up with different people who have those same ideas. I can't tell you how many times we've had, you know, Zoom calls or conversations where somebody threw out an idea and I was like, oh, I've had that idea too. And now we're, you know, sidebarring and we're like kind of bouncing ideas back and forth of, you know, each other about apps and things we want to see. And, you know, what tech do we want to kind of bring to the New Orleans area? So you just got to like look for it. And just get yourself out there, you know, even if you don't initially talk the first few times of joining some of those meetups, just like listening to people and then realizing, okay, I want to talk about this next time and stuff. They have a lot of opportunities available, just kind of knowing about them. So yeah.
Awesome. It looks like we have time for maybe one more question if anyone has a last minute question they want to throw out.
Not all at once.
Virgil here. How you doing?
Hey.
I know you can't see me, but I'm listening and I'm on the job.
No.
Multitasking. What did you do, or how did you set yourself apart to get your initial scrum role, your first scrum role?
Good question. You know, the vanity in me is like, I'm just me, you know, but no, I will tell you that I really honed in on being a woman of color, to be honest with you. One of the things that I noticed when I first got into like the software side of the industry was that I didn't see a lot of women, but I definitely didn't see a lot of women of color. And so for me, you know what I'm saying, that was the thing that kind of stood out, was that like, hey, I'm here, I'm trying to make a difference. You know, I want to show that I'm a part of diversity. Like, you know, so that was really the biggest thing is, you know, being a woman of color really helped with that, for sure.
Thank you. So can I ask one more like question, piggybacking that one?
Sure.
No.
How did you translate that onto paper? You know what I mean? Like, cause they see like their credentials and things of that nature first, and then they get to meet, you know, you.
That's a good question. You know, honestly, there isn't a way to put on your resume, I'm a Black woman. You know, it's just not really, it's not a way to do that. But I will tell you that, you know, the biggest thing that stood out on paper was the versatility that I had in projects. You know, I've worked with so many different teams, and doing international teams too really helped. So the fact that I had that skill set of being able to manage multiple teams with different time zones. I've had a lot of offshore teams. I've had teams, we were in London and India, so dealing with that, and even some of my teams here that were at different time zones. So that really stood out on my resume, but also the fact that I had I had that knowledge with different industries with inside of tech. So I had healthcare industry, you know, experience, banking experience with that. And, you know, so those things kind of stood out. And then of course, you know, when you have that opportunity, the biggest thing is trying to have your resume stand out as much as possible, so that when they do that, like when they say, okay, I need to talk to this person, when they talk to you, then you bring it on home, you sell yourself. That is the biggest thing. You are constantly selling yourself. Like, you know, like, hey, I am the latest and greatest. You want me to be, you know, a part of your team, to help manage your team, and here's why. I think that when you do have the opportunity to move past to the next level of, you know, either speaking with the hiring manager or, you know, speaking with whoever's going to be interviewing you and whatnot, you know, really honing in on how you feel like communication is key, and talking about like the skill sets that you have with structuring a team. Because with Scrum Mastering and project management, the one core thing that they have is the structuring. So if you are able to structure a team and, you know, show that based upon your previous projects or just your previous skill sets with other jobs, that really helps as well. So yeah,
So really,
I hope that helped you.
So really quickly, how long have you been a Scrum Master, and is that how you started with DXC?
Yeah, so I started with DXC as a Scrum Master, yes, as a senior Scrum Master. I've been a Scrum Master for about 10 years. But yeah, so when I got on with DXC, in a few months, it'll be 3 years with them. I came on as a senior Scrum Master. And from there, I think after about a year of being a senior Scrum Master, then I was transitioned to a senior project manager. And again, both roles are very similar, but now I'm handling more of, like I said, you know, the budgeting and like the ins and outs and more heavily metric stuff, you know, versus with the Scrum Mastering was just, you know, running the ceremonies and, you know, just really kind of being there for the team hands-on, versus now I'm also there for the team hands-on, but I'm also like really managing the whole health of the project itself.
Thank you.
No problem.
Awesome. Well, I know we're a little over time and I don't want to keep you too long, Anastasia, but thank you so much for coming here, talking to us, sharing your story, and answering everyone's questions. I know we had a lot.
No, thank you for having me. This was great. Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you to everybody for attending. We'll have the recording up soon, probably within a day or two, and emailed out to all of you who attended, along with information on our next guest speaker. Feel free to reach out to the department at cmin@dcc.edu to let us know, hey, what do you think about these guest events? And again, thank you to Anastasia for taking the time to be with us today.
Thanks. Thanks, guys. I really enjoyed this. Thank you.